In 1972, Glenn Frey was asked what he had learned from watching Graham Parsons perform at the Troubadour in Los Angeles. He said, "We got to see them play live, watch what they were doing, and check out the harmonies." That year, the Eagles released their debut album. It sold 3 million copies. Graham Parsons, whose band had taught Glenn Frey everything he needed to know, was playing to 100 people a night and living on borrowed money. When someone told Graham what the Eagles had done with what he had invented, he called their music a plastic dry fuck. He was not wrong, but he was also broke, and they were not. This is the story of the man who built country rock, and the band that took it to 150 million records without him. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Troubadour on Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood was the most important small venue in America. Every musician who mattered played there. Every musician who wanted to matter watched from the audience. Graham Parsons played the Troubadour with the Flying Burrito Brothers in 1969 and 1970, the band he had formed after leaving the Byrds, the band that was putting cosmic American music in front of a live audience for the first time. In the audience on multiple nights was a young musician from Detroit named Glenn Frey. He was not yet famous. He was not yet in a band. He was watching and learning. What he saw was something that had never existed before. Country music played with the energy and attitude of rock and roll, without apology, without irony, by musicians who believed in both genres completely. He took notes, not literally, but everything he saw went into his understanding of what a band could be. In the audience on some of those same nights was Leadon, a guitarist who had already played with Graham in the Flying Burrito Brothers, who understood the music from the inside, who would become the architectural connection between Graham's world and the world the Eagles were about to build. Leadon is the least famous founding member of the Eagles. He is also, in musical terms, the most important connection between Graham Parsons and everything that followed. Graham had personally invited Leadon to join the Flying Burrito Brothers in 1969. Leadon played on their first 2 albums, the records that laid the foundation of country rock as a genre. When the Flying Burrito Brothers began to fall apart around Graham's unreliability, Leadon left and joined a new project being assembled by Glenn Frey and Don Henley. The band needed someone who understood country music at the level Graham had been working at. Leadon was that person. He brought with him the banjo-inflected guitar style, the understanding of country harmony, the knowledge of pedal steel and open tunings, everything he had learned from 2 years of playing with Graham Parsons, and plugged it directly into the Eagles' sound. The Eagles' debut album, released in 1972, is almost unimaginable without Leadon's influence. Take It Easy, Peaceful Easy Feeling, Train Leaves Here This Morning. The country DNA of every early Eagles record runs directly back through Leadon to Graham. Graham was still alive when the Eagles released their debut. He heard it. He called it a plastic dry fuck, a diluted, commercialized version of something he had made raw and honest. He was right. He was also 25 years old and going nowhere commercially. They were about to go everywhere. In 1973, the Eagles released Desperado, their second album, a concept record built around the mythology of outlaws in the American West. The album's most country-influenced tracks, Tequila Sunrise, Desperado, 21, carry the unmistakable sound of what Graham had been making since 1968, softened for radio, smoothed for a mainstream audience that Graham had never been able to reach. Desperado was released in April 1973. 6 months later, Graham Parsons was dead. Bernie Leadon heard the news of Graham's death and went into his room. When he came out, he had the beginning of a song. He called it My Man. It appeared on the Eagles' 1974 album On the Border, a quiet, heartfelt tribute to a friend who had taught him more than anyone else about the music they were both trying to make. The Eagles never publicly credited Graham Parsons as a primary influence on their sound. They did not need to. Anyone who had heard the Flying Burrito Brothers and then heard the early Eagles could hear exactly what had happened, where the music had come from, whose hands had first shaped it. After Graham's death, the Eagles moved away from the country sound that Leadon represented and toward the harder rock sound that Don Henley and Glenn Frey preferred. Leadon left the band in 1975. Frustrated by the direction the music was taking, the country influence diminished, the sales increased. Hotel California, released in 1977, sold over 16 million copies in the United States alone. Their greatest hits compilation became the best-selling album in American music history. None of it would have existed in the form it did without what Graham Parsons had built between 1967 and 1973. The harmonies, the open tunings, the willingness to fuse country and rock without embarrassment. All of it traces back to a man who died at 26 in a motel room and never heard a single Eagles record in its final form. Glenn Frey, in a 1974 interview, acknowledged that watching Graham's band at the Troubadour had been one of the formative experiences of his musical education. Graham Parsons sold fewer records in his entire career than the Eagles sold in a single week at their commercial peak. The man who invented it lived in the margins. The men who refined it lived in the mansions. If this story moved you, subscribe. There are more of them, and not one of them ordinary.